Welcome back to lecture series in animal physiology. So, we are starting the week 11. So, there will be now small modules where we will be covering rest of the course. So, today we will be starting with the part of the system. So, we have finished with the structure of the heart and the functioning of the heart. We talked about the pacemaker and all that stuff. So, today what we will do, we will talk about that part where blood from the heart is sent to the lungs and it gets purified. So, which is part of the respiratory system. So, respiratory system is essentially is where we have anatomical structure which ensures that we inhale fresh air which is rich in oxygen. It goes to an organ called lungs, and at lungs the impure blood arrives from the heart, which is part of the pulmonary circulation, if you remember, and impure blood which is heavily concentrated with carbon dioxide is thrown out from the blood, or it diffuses out from the blood, with the right word to use, and that air which is filled with oxygen diffused into the blood. So, a blood which otherwise arriving the lungs, which is completely drenched in carbon dioxide molecules, now leaves the lungs when it is laden with oxygen molecules. This is precisely what the respiratory system does, and the window of the respiratory system to talk to the rest of the world is our nose. So, it all starts with our nose. So, it is like we inhale the air through our nose, and there are a lot of structures which ensures that the small particulates or pathogen kind of get stuck up, and the air travels through the trachea out here all the way to the lungs. So, the structure is something like this. To start off with, we are into week 11, lecture 1. Okay. So, this is our nose. So, we are inhaling the air like this, and from here it travels like this. Okay. Now, I can show you a side view, but I am going to show you the front view how it works. It splits up into two different pouch like structure which are called lungs. Now, out here where we are taking in the fresh air which is rich in oxygen, fresh air has lot of other kind of particles. It could be small inorganic particle, pathogen or something. So, much of it kind of gets stuck up in the mucus of the nose. It is the mucus. So, many a times we put our fingers in the nose and you take out that mucus which is kind of looks dirty. So, that is essentially where most of these particles kind of get stuck up, and the fresh air travel along this tube. Now, if you look at this tube is very interesting. This tube is not a continuous tube. This tube is something like this, as if these are like, you have seen the washers, different washers with the screws along with it, you have the washers. It's almost like these kind of washers which are making it, and as if there are small rings, different rings are attached to each other with a flexible face. So, it's if you look at this structure in finer details, you will find the structure to be like this. Something like this, okay? And when it inflates, it becomes something like so. This is your trachea, which is cartilaginous tissue, and it expands pretty neatly. So, instead of making it a continuous structure, on the contrary, the structure could have been like this. But then if the structure would have been like this, there would have been a lot of pressure which would have been enforced on these walls, whereas out here there is pressure, but this is a very inflatable structure, and it kind of gives a lot of window for it to expand according to the needs and the requirements. Okay. So, this trachea, so this continues, I am not just continuing out here. So, now this trachea comes inside and it splits up like this. Something like this, and we will come to the finer details once it splits up. It forms a amazingly well spread out network inside the lungs. For ensuring to meet the gaseous exchange demands out here. So, this is your lungs, and this is your trachea, and this is where all the gas exchange is taking place. Okay. Now, having shown this, now we will go to the finer details of this part, which is out here, how this area looks like. Interestingly, if you zoom in onto this area, this will be more like this kind of a structure, which otherwise you won't be able to see. And these kind of structures are called alveolar structure or alveoli, as if there are small pouches which are hanging at the end. And if you look at these individual pouches now further, so this is the first level. Second level, if you look at these pouches, this will be more like this is the individual pouch. This is how it looks like. Okay. So, this surface area this whole surface area from here to here is gaseous exchange surface. This is where the gaseous exchange takes place. But then how it takes place? As of now, we have talked about the anatomy of the lungs. Now, it takes place underneath it, if you have to look at it. Out here at this surface, what you have are the blood vessels coming. The blood vessels moves like this. They almost look like they are touching, but they are actually not touching. So, the blood is coming like this. The arrow, the pink color is showing blood vessel is moving like this, and it leaves the site like this. Now, the blood which is coming as the arrow approaching towards this gaseous exchange surface, this blood which is coming is rich in CO2, and the blood which leaves this spot, which is out here in the vessel, is rich in oxygen or O2. Okay? Rich in carbon dioxide. Now, how it does so? It's very simple. I will put a drawing, and that will clarify all your doubts, and you will never have any confusion that how this whole process kind of occurs. So, now let me draw the exact numbers that will help you here now, and just going through the whole process again just before I get to the number. So, here you have the fresh air getting inhaled, the particle and all these things kind of get stuck up here, and that is why many a times you see you have agitation, irritation which is happening, because the particles kind of get stuck up in the mucus, and this moves all the way and the air which we exhale is this. So, if this is the inhaled air, this is the air what we are exhaling. Which is plus CO2 and this is plus O2. Of course, they have one common thing. They both have nitrogen in them, which is not taking part in any kind of gaseous exchange. That has been proven beyond doubt as of now. Okay. So, now what exactly is happening here? Now, this is what is happening. Here you have the alveolar structure, which is a double membrane structure, this, and the alveolar structure or alveolus has partial oxygen tension around 100 millimeter mercury, and the CO2 is 40. This is the partial oxygen tension and carbon dioxide tension inside the lungs. This is the inhaled air. Okay. Now, there is a blood vessel which is traveling along, as I showed you in pink. Let me redo that. Okay. Almost fully touching the surface of it. This is the cross section you are seeing. Here the blood is flowing. So, blood which is approaching here, so this is out here, blood approaching alveolus from heart. So, this blood is rich in carbon dioxide and it is coming through the pulmonary artery. Pulmonary artery is bringing it, and this has partial oxygen pressure is 40, whereas partial CO2 is 45. Now, once this blood reaches out here, obviously check out the numbers. This number is 45, whereas this number is 40. So, automatically out here CO2 from here will move here, from higher to the lower side, right. Now, if we look at the oxygen numbers, which is PCO2 sitting at 40, whereas PO2 here is 100. So, automatically oxygen will be traveling from the alveolus to this chamber. Okay. So, this is how the exchange is taking place. And now, if you have understood this exchange, now there is another level of exchange. What I wanted to show is, so this is the exchange which is happening in the alveolus, but when we talk about the exchange which is taking place for this pure blood which is traveling from the aorta to the rest of the tissue, the exchange is slightly different, where the tissues will be needing oxygen. So, now say for example, if this vessel continues and now it comes to the heart, and from the heart it is the aorta which is now carrying the oxygen rich blood. This is the vessel. Okay. Oxygen rich blood which is traveling along. Now, it reaches to the site where you have the tissues, and this is where it has to exchange the gas. Now, it is no more in the lungs, it is in the other tissues. Okay. And these cells and these tissues have their own biological requirements of oxygen. Now, if you look at that zone, now you will realize the oxygen which is being carried from the heart has partial oxygen pressure of 95 and partial CO2 pressure is around 40. Whereas out here in these tissues, you will observe, any tissue as a matter of fact, you will see the partial oxygen pressure is around 40, whereas partial carbon dioxide pressure is around 45. So, by the same token, a partial carbon dioxide pressure is 45 in this tissue, and whereas the blood which is bringing has 40. So, in the systemic capillaries, so this is all happening in the capillaries. So, out here from these, whatever carbon dioxide which is being formed by these tissues is now transported into the blood vessel, whereas out here oxygen which is 95 and out here if you say 40. So, the oxygen is being absorbed by the simple diffusion. So, out here the part of the vessel, as I told you, I am just shading part of the vessel. Now, this becomes the veins which is carrying the plus CO2 blood and out here are the arteries which are bringing arteries followed by the capillaries bringing O2 rich blood, and here you have exchange of gas. So, now you have a comparative picture of gaseous exchange in the tissue as well as in the lungs. So, now you know the values, you can compare the values, and that is what the basic fundamental of respiratory physiology, what you needed to know. Thank you.